Will the Fitz magic continue this week? Can the Patriots get back on track against the Dolphins? And will you be the next Football Guys millionaire? I'm Austin Lee, and this is the Football Guys DFS Power Grid. I'm joined, as always, by John Lee, Ryan Hester, and Devin Knotts. And before we answer those questions and get into our first segment talking about Vegas, I just want to give a special shout-out to Football Guys staffer Steve Buzzard for taking down the $1 million contest on FanDuel this past Sunday. He crushed it, totally deserving. He's one of the hardest working guys in DFS. And so we want to leverage some of that knowledge that he brings to our team and help you out and help you become the next millionaire this week. Hopefully we can give you some picks that'll help your lineups. We'll be covering the main slate, the Week 4 main slate for DraftKings and FanDuel. John, we're going to start off where we always start off, and that is with Vegas, looking at the lines, the spreads, and see if there's anything there that can help us. Now, we noticed that maybe a lot of these high-scoring games aren't on the main slate. I also want to hear how that might change your strategy on the kinds of slates you play this week.
Well, for a lot of people, they're going to miss because we record this on Thursday night, right around when the game starts. They're going to miss that Thursday to Monday slate, which is my favorite slate because some of those contests are actually fairly large. So you're going to be relegated to playing the Sunday-Monday slate. That Monday night game is really interesting. We won't talk about it a lot, but if you want a sleeper pick, I like Case Keenum and GPPs this week. On Monday night. But, Vegas, a lot of stuff going on. Looking at the Vegas value chart this week, which I update about every other day on the site. Home teams this week, all of them are at the top of the list. Atlanta, the Chargers, Green Bay, New England. All of them are about 4 touchdowns, so some goodness there. The New Orleans Saints are favorites on the road. Historically, that has been a trap. It'll be interesting. We can talk a little bit about whether or not we like Drew Brees and Michael Thomas this week and paying the premium for those guys. And even Chicago, the Bears with Mitchell Trubisky, 25 points against Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay has not been good. I think that there's some value there, and we'll talk about that as well. On the other side, probably going to stay away from the Jets playing in Jacksonville as big underdogs. And on the other end, Buffalo gained no respect last week. They go into Minnesota or Wisconsin or wherever the heck they played, and they're still the second lowest team total on the board playing at Green Bay. And, so I don't know. That they do pretty well in Minnesota or Wisconsin. I don't know.
They were in Minnesota. Don't upset our fans of the Vikings and the Packers. They're very different. One is Green Bay and one is, Minnesota. So we're not going to mix the two.
You know that I'm referencing, I hope, right? You saw on Twitter when Buffalo said we're on our way to Minnesota, and they had a plane, and the plane landed in Wisconsin on their schematic. That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, I totally missed that. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little slow.
Sorry.
Since when is the oldest guy on the show the one keeping up with Twitter the most? Come on, Austin.
Isn't Twitter like for old? Never mind. We won't go there. Keep going with your Vegas analysis.
I'm all set. Well, let's go. Let's talk about some football.
Awesome.
Your Snapchat.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to go back to my MySpace page and update.
Can we talk about some football?
Yeah, exactly.
Please.
Let's talk about quarterbacks. We've got Jimmy Garoppolo.
Baker Mayfield.
What?
I don't care what you have to say. Start Baker Mayfield.
Start Baker Mayfield? Just going to roll out the rookie. It's time.
It's time.
Yeah,
It's time.
Ryan hates that call. Immediately, and John is agreeing with the hatred for that call. Okay, Ryan, hit me. Why?
Right, no. I want Devin to make the case first.
Okay.
He'll convince me.
So how do rookies struggle? Typically, they struggle by being pressured or seeing exotic blitzes. What do the Raiders simply not have is a pass rush. Losing Khalil Mack. Gary and Conley's really struggled. Marcus Gilchrist is at the safety really hasn't been that great either. So I think Mayfield at 5,300 is simply too cheap. We saw him last week against the Jets team that in a spot that he was down and showing poise to drive the team back. So it's really a spot where I think the Jets' passing defense is better than the Raiders, and he tore them apart. So he has a ton. I don't want to say he's a ton, but he has some good options in that offense. With Antonio Callaway's looking pretty good. Jarvis Landry made a phenomenal catch last week. I'm typically the guy who says don't start Browns, but at 5,300 on DraftKings, he's the first guy I'm looking to, and really just moving on to different positions.
You're not going to take advantage of the Jimmy Garoppolo ACL injury and go even cheaper and go with CJ Beathard. John just rolled his eyes so far that the people in Minnesota could feel it. John, tell me what you think.
Look, I mean, Baker Mayfield, I'm not going to have a strong opinion on him and what he's going to do in this particular game. But if I'm Hugh Jackson, and this if any of us are Hugh Jackson, right? Because who the heck knows what this guy's going to do?
I'm not Hugh Jackson.
Carlos Hyde, 23 touches, 17 touches, 25 touches in his first 3 games. They're riding him heavily, and they're not a huge underdog here. They may not have to throw the ball a whole lot, and I just don't see it. For $100 more, I can have Andy Dalton against Atlanta in a potential shootout, or for what was it? 4,600, I can have CJ Beathard.
Do not.
No. If you're gonna talk lunacy, I'm gonna do the same thing. CJ Beathard last season when CJ Beathard was starting, and I think that was like 6 games, he had a rushing touchdown in 3 of them. He had 14 yards, 30 yards, 40 yards, 16, 15, 21. So you're going to get two points just on the ground, and you know what? And they're going to be chasing points the whole game. They're 10.5 point underdogs. If he gets 175 yards through the air, that's 7 points. He gets 2 points on the ground.
We're really talking about
touchdown.
No. Hold on. I'm going to do the move that John did last week when we talked about obscure tight ends, and I'm just going to go back to John's first point was the entire reason I disagreed with Baker Mayfield in the first place. It doesn't have anything to do with what Devin said, because what Devin said makes sense. Mayfield looked great coming into that game, and Oakland does not get after the passer. But Andy Dalton's $100 more in a game where he's going to throw it all over the place.
I like Andy Dalton. Don't get me wrong. I'm not.
That's the play.
It's only $100, and
I can't get behind even considering CJ Beathard. My face is turning red, and
I can't do it with Mayfield, so we're even.
Okay, so let's look at some other guys. We said that in that price range, Dalton seems like a pick for 2 of you, and then maybe and Devin seems to like him as well. What if you paying up a little bit more? Are you going to go Deshaun Watson at 6,300? Is that the time? Yeah, John, tell me more about that.
I mean, Watson's kind of in the same category as Cam Newton. He's getting 30 rushing yards per game, thereabouts. He's so far this season, I'm looking now, 40, 44, and 36. So he's averaging about 4 fantasy points on the ground. So that makes for a nice floor. Excuse me. And then he's going up against a defense in Indianapolis that we were poo-pooing pretty much all year in terms of their secondary. And that's a potential shootout, that game. We'll talk more about it. But I think that
Ryan says no.
We're all over the place tonight.
I love it.
But Indy hasn't allowed more than 17 fantasy DraftKings points to any QB this year. I mean, it's not a murderer's row, but it's Andy Dalton, Alex Smith, Carson Wentz. Their defense might be better than we thought. Might be. So I don't know that there's –
So Ryan, Rivers, or Watson? Because it's Rivers all day for me.
Watson's
Matt
third
Ryan,
there.
Phillip Rivers, or Watson.
Watson's third there for me. And the only worry I have with Rivers is that San Fran doesn't keep up, and that becomes
that's the worry. But with Richard Sherman out, they're going to have no secondary.
No, they are not. I agree. I wrote in my column this week that Gordon seems like the spot, but that Rivers and the passing game guys seem like a great GPP option. So I like that a lot.
And I did the same thing for my tips and pick video on Roto-Grinders and Football Guys. I featured Rivers for the same reasons you guys are describing.
So it sounds like we're all in agreement that Rivers over Watson.
Not in cash. I think in cash, Watson's still the play.
Okay.
Devin says Rivers. So either you're paying a little more for Rivers or you're dropping down to You're not playing Baker Mayfield in cash, are you, Devin? Or are you? Yeah. He's got that smile on his face. You think he's
real?
As of now, no.
Yeah.
But check out the blog I do. I update my cash lineup Saturday morning and Sunday morning too. So, and answer some questions out there. So I may have a lineup or two that has him in cash.
Yeah.
Do a census by then.
In GPPs, I also like Blake Bortles at 5,200 on DraftKings.
Yeah, you do.
No one is going to have Bortles after being burned last week. Going up against the Jets secondary. It's a talented secondary, but we saw Baker Mayfield tear it apart. So it's more of a game theory. I'm a game theory perspective where start the guy that everyone was on the previous week that struggled, and there's a reason everyone liked him this last week. And a lot of times things are fluky in the NFL, and Blake Bortles is one of those volatile players. So at 5,200, he's too cheap.
There's two other quarterbacks I want to talk about before we move on. I definitely want your guys' take on Drew Brees on the road, and I want to talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has 3 400-yard games in a row and at least 3 touchdowns in each of them. Who wants to talk about either of those guys?
I can't do Drew Brees.
No, not why?
On the road against a good Giants secondary, it just I don't ever start him on the road. At 6,600, I'll target the pieces around him, but I won't target him directly.
Okay, fair. John held up the agreement sign there. What about Ryan Fitzpatrick? Go ahead, Ryan.
Are we? I know, Devin, we got into this briefly last week, but the Giants' fantasy points numbers are good, but they've faced Blake Bortles, Dak Prescott, and Deshaun Watson kind of tore them up last week. So I still am a little hesitant to call them good. But I do agree Brees on the road could be a bit trappy, and after 3 really strong games, those guys are kind of bound to slow down. Go ahead, Austin, back to
and the Giants secondary was a little banged up last week.
They were. That's true.
So,
they were.
They may be getting some of that help back this week.
Point.
And he did practice. Eli Apple practiced today.
Great. Okay. That is a big deal. Okay.
Ryan Fitzpatrick, why not?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying. On the road at Chicago, though, should we be afraid of that for any reason?
No.
Not really.
I'm not playing it. I'm not chasing it.
Yeah.
I was the one on here a few weeks ago saying go ahead, but I'm not chasing it this week. I think that's a bad matchup for them.
I think a lot of people won't be chasing it, but that kind of makes me like it. So
I think recency bias is going to put his ownership high enough that there's better options.
Yeah, but people are in love with this Bears defense, and I get why, because their pass rush is really special. But
it's tough because the pass rush is great, but they're allowing the 4th highest amount of their total points are 77% of their total points are via passing touchdowns, which is 4th most, and 76% of their yards are via pass. So
yeah, the only worry I have is Eddie Jackson at free safety covering. I mean, he's going to take Deshaun Jackson out of the game, but Mike Evans might be the play.
On paper, it's good. It's just, is he going to turn into a pumpkin this week or not? And for a half of football last week, Ryan Fitzpatrick went old Ryan Fitzpatrick. So it's tough.
But if it would have been Fitzmagic the whole game, he would have thrown for 800 yards.
That's what he's throwing for this week.
Yeah. At least 600.
I could throw a football over them mountains.
He's played 2 really bad secondaries so far. 2 really bad secondaries.
Yeah.
And the third, D-Jax got behind the defense for about 100 yards. So maybe he does it again. I'm not paying 6,200 for him. If he was still 5,000 like he was a few weeks ago, maybe I take a chance. But I'll have 0 of him this week.
Yeah. All right, guys. Anything else on quarterbacks before we move to running backs?
So just to recap, Ryan and I like Rivers at the top. John likes Watson.
Yeah.
I'm potentially on Mayfield.
Right.
Those two disagree with me wholeheartedly. And
you're more on Dalton at that price
the
range.
Perennial playoff loser in Andy Dalton.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's week 4.
It's a good thing we're not in the playoffs.
Week 4.
Playoffs?
Isn't AJ Green hurt?
No, he's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like he's
practice Thursday. Practice Wednesday. Practice Thursday. Feels confident.
There's a new sheriff in town anyhow. Answers to the name Tyler Boyd, right?
Let's not jump to receivers just yet.
But since we're going to running backs, let's just do the Atlanta versus running backs thing. And Gio Bernard could score a receiving touchdown this week, and he could catch 8 balls. So that helps Andy Dalton too. So, Austin, go ahead and go to running backs, and I like Gio Bernard.
There you go. Yes, it's true. So, yeah, I mean, in that game, it looks like, just like last week, Devonta Freeman and Joe Mixon are probably going to miss again. So you're looking at Tevin Coleman and Giovanni Bernard for if you're looking for running backs in that game. We're keeping an eye on sort of the Jacksonville backfield. Sounds like both Fournette and Yeldon got in a limited practice on Thursday, but, Fournette has been a little risky up until the last minute the last few weeks. LaShawn McCoy practiced in a non-contact jersey this week, and, he may give it a go, but Chris Ivory could fill in for him again. John, tell me about the running backs that you like this week.
I think we're all going to agree on this one. This is Zeke week, right?
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
If the player photos on, our Football Guys articles are any indication, it's all Ezekiel Elliott and Matt Ryan. So, a lot of people like Zeke this week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can. So they're playing Detroit. Week 1, Isaiah Crowell, 10 carries, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. Week 2, Breida, 11 carries, 138 yards and a touchdown. And last week, New England didn't do anything on the ground against them, but they really didn't try. They only rushed 18 total times. They had almost 100 yards there. Enter a Cowboys defense that's been completely dysfunctional through the air. I think this is just feed Zeke as much as they possibly can. I really think this is a breakout spot for him because he's kind of been struggling himself. He hasn't surpassed 20 touches yet this season. No, I take that back. In week 2, he did have 17 carries and 5 receptions. But even so, he hasn't done a whole lot. This is a spot for him to really break out, and he's super cheap at 7,700.
Nice.
Beyond him, Alvin Kamara. I'm done going against Alvin Kamara. And I just looked over at Ryan as if he saw me, but the dude is unbelievable. If you can fit him into your lineups, and that's the thing with, excuse me, I'm coming off a cold. Opportunity cost is everything in DFS, and if you can fit him in, where the opportunity cost doesn't cause you to take a what I call a 3K crapper, or Dan Bach calls a 3K crapper.
Right.
If you don't have to take a 3K crapper, you really like your 3K guy. Like last week, Tyler Boyd was that guy, 3,700 all across the industry. He's 35% owned, and he delivers like 19 points. It worked well if you had him and Kamara in a lineup, but there are other weeks where getting Kamara into your lineup forces you to take a guy like D.D. Westbrook, and he gets 2 points, and all of a sudden it doesn't matter what Kamara scores because you can't make up that ground. And the opportunity cost then really becomes something that you need to be thinking about.
All right, so when we get to the receivers, I need some of those 3K crappers so that we can get Kamara into our lineups. Running backs, Devin, who do you like at running back this week?
Yeah, a couple guys. So the first guys, I'm going to go cheap. So if you want to spend up at other positions, Aaron Jones for the Packers. So they're going up against a Buffalo run defense that really just hasn't. I mean, ever since they lost Marcel Darius the last 14 games ago, they really haven't performed. They shut down Latavius Murray last week, but Latavius Murray just isn't very good at football. First reference of the year on this podcast.
He had 2 carries.
Yeah, he had 2 carries.
The game script shut him down.
Yeah, Jones, I think, is by far the most talented running back on this Packers team. Jamal Williams kind of just isn't – he's almost Trent Richardson-like, where he just runs right into the hole and doesn't make a juke and runs right into the linebacker. Jones, I think, has if he can get 12 to 14 carries, he had 6 last week in his first game back, but if he can get 10 to 12 to 14, he'll pay off his cheap salary. Sony Michel, so Rex Burkhead is out for at least the next, several weeks. He was put on IR. So it's really Michel and James White. And James White, the Patriots don't really trust to run the ball with. So Michel's kind of the guy, which we've avoided New England for a long time, but going against a Miami team that, they're kind of middle of the road in terms of run defense. And then the last guy I like on the other side of that game is Kenyon Drake. So we saw Kerryon Johnson have the first 100-yard game against this New England team in, I think, 4 years. And Danny Shelton really just hasn't performed on this Patriots defensive line. So this is an area where they're really weak, and we saw that the Lions just ran the ball. Both Blunt and Johnson had 16 carries apiece. I think this is a scenario where Kenyon Drake could get 20-plus carries.
Right on. Ryan, who else you got at running back?
So, the top of the cash list was Ezekiel Elliott, and we talked about that. And as you referenced, Austin, every article on our site this week will tell you why.
Yeah.
So in the interest of time, I'll go a little bit deeper. And maybe, in an effort to fit Kamara in or something like that, you have to go with a relatively cheap RB2. So it surprised me very much when I was writing last night that Marshawn Lynch popped up. Cleveland allows over 40% of their points via rushing touchdowns, which is the most in the league. And Oakland scores 34% of theirs via rushing, which is sixth most in the league. Lynch has 8 carries inside the 10 this year, at least 2 of those in every game. And there's only 3 running backs in the league with at least 1 rushing touchdown in every game this year, and Lynch is one of those. So if they get down there, it's likely he's going to get the ball. And just for the purposes of multi-touchdown upside alone, at 4,800 DraftKings, 6,400 FanDuel, it's a GPP play. I'm not saying I would do it in cash, but we always look for guys who can score twice, right? And that's kind of the baseline for GPP work. And I think Lynch can if they get down there a couple times. The other guy I like is actually, and I think maybe somebody was going to interrupt me, but let me just get this last one out, and then we'll talk back to that. I will take any disagreements because I'm never a Marshawn Lynch guy. So please, somebody help me.
There's a first time for everything.
Exactly. So the other guy I like is actually Matt Breida. As long as the knee is okay. He had a really weird looking knee injury, non-contact in the last game that looked like he was going to be out for the season, but he came back for the game. Last year, Carlos Hyde had 8.3 targets a game with C.J. Beathard, and without C.J. Beathard, he had 3.8 targets a game. And we know that Kyle Shanahan's offense likes to use the running backs in all facets. So there's something there. And just the cliche of young quarterbacks making easy throws. You think running backs, you think tight ends. Well, the Chargers do very well against tight ends and not very well against receivers and running backs. So all that kind of plays into Matt Breida, who can carry the ball, who can catch the ball. So that's another GPP play. I don't really feel great about playing him in a cash game or conservative type of format. But those 2 guys are interesting, and you might want to sprinkle them in.
Nice. John, was that you? Did you have an additional thought?
Yeah, it wasn't so much it was more of a question because I really hadn't given a whole lot of thought to Marshawn Lynch, and I wanted clarification because I thought you started the recommendation off based on a cash game recommendation, Ryan, because you said to get Kamara into your lineups you might have to go cheap. So you're not suggesting cash. I don't
No. And in fact, this week, last week I was saying Kamara cash, but this week I actually don't, just because of what we talked about with the Saints earlier. It just feels like a spot where the Saints may disappoint. But, in case we're wrong about that, if we are, Kamara will produce, I feel like. There's a lot of stats that also show that the Giants give up a lot of receiving production to running backs too. So it was more of a GPP thing trying to jam him in. I don't know that I don't feel as confident this week in him as I did last week.
And John, generally I ask you like GPP sort of game theory on some of the highest priced guys. Is Kamara a guy that you'll be underweight on in GPPs this week compared to the field, you think?
I'm trying to pull up early. It looks like he's 25% or thereabouts.
Yeah.
I'm going to be underweight if he's that high. He's 9,600. As I said, that opportunity cost is really high this week. And we're going to talk about wide receivers in just a moment, but there's not a whole lot I like at the wide receiver position this week. So I'll probably be very widely distributed there and more focused on running backs because I think there are some running backs, some of whom we've talked about that I like. I'm not going to add a whole lot other than to say I also really like Sony Michel. So on that end, we'll agree. Where we will disagree, or let me throw it out there. Maybe I don't disagree. What do you guys think of, and I think I know the answer from Devin already, but what do you think of Kerryon Johnson at 4,400 against Dallas without Sean Lee? Last week he had 16 carries, 101 yards. The only thing that gives me a little bit of pause is that LeGarrette Blount also had 16 carries, and maybe we are overreading how the Lions staff will respond to that performance from Kerryon Johnson.
What do you think?
I think that's the issue, is that it's a split backfield. It's the Patriot way of old, and Sean Lee's good, but I think that there's more to this Dallas defense than I think Jalen Smith is playing at a level that we've finally seen him play. Leighton Vander Esch is playing okay. He's not playing great, but the biggest thing that's helping this Cowboys rush defense is their secondary. So their secondary is playing so good that their safeties can play closer to the line and help out in the running game, which is something we haven't seen in past years. I think Kerryon will be very popular because his price really hasn't jumped up accordingly, and we've seen it happen in some of these late Sunday games where they don't really impact his price as much as they should. And people like the story of him being the first Lions back over 100 yards, but it's a Dallas, as you know, plays at a pretty slow pace historically with running the ball, so it's not really an area I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Just one real quick. I mean, it would be tournament only, because in cash games, I'm going to have Ezekiel Elliott, and I do not want two running backs from what could be the slowest paced game on the slate in the same cash game lineup. And football coaches are football coaches. Like, even though one player is clearly better, they're still going to use the veteran sometimes just because that's just what they do. And I don't know. I'm not a football coach, but it doesn't seem like the right thing to do, but they do it anyways. So that I don't think it's a safe play. I think there's reason to sprinkle him in GPPs, but it's not a lot.
In cash this week, you could go Kamara and Elliott. You really could.
We'll talk about your wide receivers.
Yeah, we need some cheap receivers and tight ends in the next 2 sections for sure to help people try to squeeze both of those guys in.
It's definitely Elliott for sure, but Kamara's rough.
So John referenced sort of roster percentages. Steve Buzzard posts a projection for what he thinks is going to be the percentages that each player is rostered in GPPs. And then he won the million last week, and he wrote a special article this week talking about how he uses those roster percentages to help him build his GPP lineups. So be sure to check that out over at footballguys.com. It kind of ties together sort of this, I feel like, an advanced perspective on how to handle your GPP lineups. Let's talk wide receivers, guys. We've got Keenan Allen we're keeping an eye on. He's got a knee injury and a tooth injury, according to the official injury report. I don't know that I've seen that before, but he didn't practice on Thursday. And then Travis Benjamin had a limited practice on Thursday as well. So though that receiving core is a bit banged up. And then we're still keeping an eye on Doug Baldwin, who might come back this week. And then Randall Cobb was a late add on Thursday. It almost sounded like he got injured in the Thursday practice, potentially. So keep an eye on Randall Cobb there. May open up a little bit more targets for some of the other Green Bay pass catchers. There's a couple more on here, but I'll let the guys talk about them if they want. Ryan, I'm going to kick it to you first for wide receivers. And if we can offer some cheap receivers in this segment, that would be really helpful because we mentioned some expensive running backs.
Yeah, I'm struggling at the top of receiver too. It doesn't even seem like nobody sticks out. So I'd love to hear what the guys say about if they're paying up for receiver this week. But one, I guess I'd call him moderately priced at 4,900. Actually like Sterling Shepard this week for the Giants. The matchup is really good against the Saints. They are the Saints of 2016. They are not the Saints of 2017. The one guy on that team that can actually guard somebody is Marshawn Lattimore. He did a pretty good job against Julio Jones last week. But we saw Calvin Ridley run 10 routes and go 4 for 119 and 2 touchdowns. This is the wide receiver 2 for Atlanta. I'm confident Shepard will run more than 10 routes. Excuse me. So I think at 4,900, he's very viable this week.
Especially with Evan Ingram out.
Yeah, Evan Ingram is out as well.
Yep.
So that definitely helps Shepard's value for sure. Ryan, give me one more guy. You got at least one more guy.
That's what he had. That's it.
That's what he got. Okay.
Okay.
I had more. I'm sitting here coughing on mute, fighting the same.
No, you cough, John. Hit me with yours. We can come back.
Okay, I had one more, but I don't think anyone will mention him. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm certainly not going to mention him. I'll be completely transparent here and say that this is a very thin position this week, in my opinion. My number one play was also Sterling Shepard. He's another guy I talked about on my tips and picks video earlier this week. I think he's in prime position to perform for all the reasons that's already been talked about. If you're paying up, you have a choice, right? You have I think a guy that's going to be really popular is Michael Thomas for all the reasons that he succeeded yet this season, but I don't think I'm going that way in cash. He's going to get some Janoris Jenkins, get a little bit of Eli Apple, and he gets Drew Brees away from home. I think you can go elsewhere and get similar floor without all the risk. And for me, that's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. He's about $700 less, and I think he has a very similar floor. Will Fuller has been stealing a little bit of action there, but I don't think that's sustainable. I think Nuke Hopkins is still in play. If you're spending up for cash games, that's the way I'm going. At the bottom end, and I'll brace the viewers for this because these guys have been waiting for this for about 30 minutes now. I'm going at the bottom end of this. I'm going with Kelvin Benjamin at 3,600. I know you guys are going to hate it, but just hear me out here.
Ryan quickly flashed up the red flag.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But hear me out here. So Kelvin Benjamin, week 1, he's got Peterman for a half, right? So we can at least get rid of that half. The second half, he gets Josh Allen in his NFL debut in a game he didn't think he was going to be playing against Baltimore, whose secondary, you can make an argument they're not bad. Week 2, he goes against the Chargers, and he gets the Casey Hayward treatment. And last week, he gets Xavier Rhodes. This is the first week where he actually gets some decent reprieve from high-level coverage. The team is going to be playing from behind. They're 10-point underdogs, so there's going to be at least 30, 35 throws. How many of those come his way? Honestly, I mean, you guys are smiling, but I'm making a lot of sense here, and I can tell just by the way you're all looking.
No, because he's going to drop like 5 of those.
If he gets a dozen targets, he catches 7 passes, and he's only 3,600. PPR league, he's the guy I'm saving salary on this.
Josh Allen has never had a 60% completion percentage in college or.
Can we memorialize I'm making a lot of sense here? Did you really just say that? I did. All right. Kelvin Benjamin is averaging 5 targets per week this year. And I know he had some tough corner matchups and bad quarterbacks, but the leader on Buffalo in any given week has had like 4. In week 2, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players with at least 3 targets. Last week, they had 1, 2, 3, 4 players with at least 3 targets. I mean, they spread it around. They throw to whoever. And maybe that changes if Kelvin Benjamin has a good matchup, but let's not pretend like Kelvin Benjamin is an elite wide receiver. I mean, he's their wide receiver 1, but he's not a wide receiver 1.
Supporting John's theory, though, Charles Clay didn't practice on Thursday. That takes away one of the Buffalo targets.
And a person named Jason Kroom got a touchdown last week.
Jason Kroom.
Jason Kroom.
Oh, I can't wait to tell you guys about how well Kelvin Benjamin plays about 3 o'clock on Sunday.
I'm speechless.
It's going to be great.
I love it. Okay, Devin, tell me about some of the receivers that you like this week.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys. So I mentioned Kamara and Elliott in cash. So that obviously means we're going to have to go cheap. So Mike Williams for the Chargers, especially since Keenan Allen is banged up. Richard Sherman is out, who would have covered Williams on the outside. So this is a scenario where Mike Williams should and is emerging to show the talent that the Chargers picked him in the first round last year. Tyler Boyd, going back to a shootout game. If we like Andy Dalton, we kind of have to like Tyler Boyd at 4,600. So those are the first 2 that pop off. Geronimo Allison at 4,700. He's sneaky been consistent. And in cash, all you're looking for from a guy who's 4,700 is somewhere in that 11 to 12 range. And he's had, in each of his 3 games this year, he's had 69, 64, and 76 yards with 5, 6, and 2 receptions, including 2 touchdowns. So he's turning into the second option in this Packers offense, and really a surprise story. Albert Wilson is the last guy that I have on my list, so he's only $100 more than Kelvin Benjamin. The Dolphins are likely going to have to throw the ball against New England, and Wilson's been good. So he had a 74. Well, I should say he's more of a GPP play first of all, but he's shown a deep threat that we really haven't seen from him throughout his career. So he had a 74-yard catch last week. More of a GPP threat. You're hoping he has another one of those big catches, but he's had 3 catches longer than 20 yards. So hope that the Dolphins get behind and they're throwing deep. And adding one more, sorry. I know that we may be pressed for time, but I've never cared about time.
It's all good.
Taylor Gabriel. So Taylor Gabriel going up against the Buccaneers. So we saw in the slot where Juju Smith-Schuster had a huge game on Monday night. And Gabriel had 10 targets last week. He's not getting yardage, so he's more of these underneath routes, and he's yet to break one deep, but he has the speed to do it, and at 3,900 for 10 targets is simply too cheap. And one more, why not? Chris Godwin, if you believe in Fitzmagic, if you believe in magic.
And I know you do.
Yeah. Then Chris Godwin has to be intriguing because they really haven't increased his price enough.
Real quick, Austin.
Yeah, let's come back to you, Cough Master G.
Cough Master. The other one that I had, and I'm interested because Devin was banging the table for Baker Mayfield, and he named like 14 guys in that same price range. Antonio Callaway. You don't like Antonio Callaway? 10 targets last week, 5 from Mayfield? No?
No.
Okay, well then maybe I shouldn't either, but playing over 90% of the snaps.
I just think that for Antonio Callaway, I like Jarvis Landry more. I think that Mayfield in a full week of practice with the ones, I think Mayfield has a tendency to not – I don't think he's going to throw it deep enough. Or Tyrod would, take a couple chances a game, but Callaway just – I mean, as a GPP play, why not? He has the speed to break one, but he has bust potential where he could have, 2 catches for 19 yards.
All right.
Fair enough.
Let's move on to tight ends. We've already mentioned a couple of the key injuries with Evan Ingram and Charles Clay. And then same as last week, it looks like Jack Doyle's not going to be back. He didn't practice on Thursday. So let's talk tight ends. John, let's talk with you about tight ends first. Maybe there's even more value here as well to, again, help with getting some of those expensive running backs into your lineups. Who are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, I think for cash games to go cheap again, I typically go cheap at tight end on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think there's more of a reason to pay up for some of the more quality tight ends, and I'm more of a DraftKings guy. So I'm looking at Austin Hooper at 2,900 against Cincinnati. They have on the main slate, the Atlanta Falcons have the highest implied team total on the board. And we saw last week, it doesn't have to go to Julio Jones. In fact, we've seen that for the past year. It doesn't have to go to Julio Jones, right?
The past decade.
Exactly. And I really don't think that he burned a lot of people last week. But if you want to go back with Eric Ebron, he had 11 targets. A bunch of them were in garbage time, but he's only 3,600. So he's a guy I think will also be popular. Looking at Buzzard's projections on tight end usage, it looks like Ebron, he's got it about 10% and Hooper at 6%. So number one is Rob Gronkowski, which is no surprise. And then, one guy I just want to make a comment on. I'm at this point, I'm not so sure, but a guy I think is going to end up being popular. We record this a bit early in the week, but a lot of information comes out. The team has been the absolute worst against defending tight ends. And maybe a trend spotting guy over here is going to talk about this in a minute. But that's Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is allowing 21 points per game to tight ends. And I'm going to give you a chance to rebut because I'm not so sure I like this play. But Trey Burton is 3,900 this week, and I think he's going to be somewhat popular. This team, the Tampa Bay Bucks, have faced Vance McDonald. Everybody saw that last week. I think I heard Ryan screaming from Florida about the stiff arm that he gave to the defensive back en route to an 80-yard touchdown. You take away that ridiculous touchdown, and they give up like 30 yards in coverage. Ben Watson had 40 yards in week 1. And then Zach Ertz in week 2. He had a huge day, but that's also on a team that uses Zach Ertz like he's a wide receiver. So I don't think this Tampa Bay defense is as bad against tight ends as the stats would currently have you believe. And then you add in some questions about what I think about Trey Burton in general, and I think he's more of a fade than a tout. And I know that Ryan disagrees with me, so let's talk.
I love that when you took away the giant play, Ryan was like, "How can you take away the big play?"
And it's not even that, because we averages and things that are more likely to happen are things we should look at than things that are less likely to happen. However, Vance McDonald's 75-yard touchdown was probably a 30-yard gain without the stiff arm heard around the world. Nobody was covering him on that play, John. Chris Conte was stiff-armed onto IR. He's the guy that was supposed to cover tight ends, and now he's not playing anymore. So
take away. Okay, so I'll give him 30 yards. They would have ended up with 37.
Okay, the Steelers target their tight ends less than 2/3 of the team in the league. I know I should know this off the top of my head, given my affinity for stats and the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they don't throw to their tight ends, so who cares? Neither do the Ravens. So, I'm sorry, who was the first team you mentioned? I'm on tilt now because you talked about a 75-yard catch, like as though those just happened.
The Saints. But Ben Watson.
Okay, so what is Ben Watson's 100 years old? They don't target they target Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and almost nobody else. So these guys are producing despite the fact that those teams don't target them. Trey Burton has at least 5 targets in every game. The only reason I wouldn't want to play Trey Burton has nothing to do with his price or Tampa not being as bad. It's Mitchell Trubisky. That's the only reason I wouldn't want to play Trey Burton. If he were $400 or $500 cheaper, he would be a lock. $3,900 is a lot. I also like Hooper, just like you said, so we do agree there. I also like David Njoku for $3,200, especially given what Devin just said about Jarvis Landry.
You guys are missing the most obvious guy on the board.
Targets.
Well, we're still talking about Trey Burton. Look, I want to close up the Trey Burton talk. The reason I bring him up is because I do think that as more and more content comes out this week, he's going to be – right now he's the number 6 guy on Buzzard's board. I think he ends up top 3 or 4, and I just want to go on record saying that I'm not as high on him as the rest. I'll have some exposure for some of the reasons that Ryan mentions, but I'll be underweight on the field at probably what he ends up 10 to 12%.
All right, Devin, you talk about
Devin. Yeah, who's your guy?
Dallas Goedert, 7 for 71 last week for Philly. He's 4,600 on FanDuel. He's 2,900 on DraftKings.
28. I think he's 2,800.
2,800. Thank you.
Even better.
So for a guy who else do the Eagles have to throw to besides? Nelson Aguilar is kind of it's weird. Nelson Aguilar was this deep threat last year, and all of a sudden he is not. It's a very weird scenario with him that he's kind of just playing a Taylor Gabriel role where he's getting these underneath catches. But outside of Aguilar and Ertz, it's really Goedert. I don't even know how to pronounce the guy's name, and I should. So, but 7 for 71, he was one of the top tight ends in the draft heading into this year. I think he's as talented, if not more talented, than David Njoku, and he's $600 cheaper on FanDuel. If you're trying to save money, if you have the money to spend up, my favorite guy is Jared Cook. Cleveland has actually been decent this year against tight ends, but historically they haven't been. And Cook is an integral part of this offense, so he's my favorite if you're able to spend up to $4,100. But Dallas, I'll just call him, on the Eagles is my second favorite guy.
You're on a first name basis with Mr. Dallas.
Tyler Eifert's also too cheap.
Is the Goedert is that a cash game play, Devin?
Yes.
So we're not worried at all about he had 34 combined snaps in the first 2 games, and
because he's one of those tight ends that when he's on the field he's running routes. He's not a blocking guy.
Look, I think that offense changed when Mike Wallace went down in week 2. So I don't think this is a terrible call per se.
Okay.
Especially, I was a little afraid at first because I'm sorry, I feel like Ryan. I'm coughing, but Alshon Jeffrey was cleared for practice, and so I thought, he's going to be back this week. Things will be back to normal, but it's Thursday, and he still actually hasn't practiced. So I think we can expect more of the same this week. But I think calling him a cash game play is dangerous.
That's bold.
To the point of the 34 combined snaps, he had 1 combined catch for 4 combined yards in those games. So it just seems like it was a narrower target funnel last week, and he took advantage.
Jared, what are we doing with O.J. Howard?
What are we doing with him?
Yeah.
Same thing I do with him every week. Nothing.
Why? It's 72, 3 for 96 and a touchdown over the last 2 weeks. He's more and more involved in this offense than he's ever been.
He has 2, 4, and 8 targets respectively. If he does 8 targets again this week, then I'll pay attention in week 5.
That's improving.
Oh no, you're right. It's
at that rate, he's
going to have 16
targets.
He'll have 16 this week. You're right about that. But as soon as I go all in on O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate has a big day.
But he's going to be popular. I mean, can we agree on that people are going to be gravitated to him because of the big play potential?
He's got Buzzard has him at 3.3%. So
I think that's too low.
Well, I mean, it's still early week, so anything's possible.
Yeah, he did win $1 million.
If he's 3.3, then I'll be on him. He also had the Bills at 1%, and he started the Bills. But so I mean, there's good plays out there that ownership percentage doesn't drive everything. But I think Howard, if he's 3.3%, he's one of the few tight ends that has the ability to catch a 75-yard touchdown, which he's shown before. He's one of the fastest tight ends in football and is extremely talented. So if he's 3.3, I think it's a solid GPP play.
Let's talk defenses, guys. Ryan, who is your favorite defense this week? Maybe tell us whether you're playing him in cash or in GPP. Maybe one for each if you got him.
Oh, boy.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, you jammed me up here. I think, gosh, it's hard. I like Seattle. I mean, that's the cash game play. They are on the road, and they're far from the Legion of Boom, Seattle. But
they're playing Arizona.
They lose this week.
You think Seattle loses this week?
They might. I mean, they really might. I don't know that the upside is there. I think it's a floor play. And almost on the other side of that game, Arizona maybe is the GPP play. They're cheaper. They're 2,600 DraftKings. Seattle's offensive line is horrible. If Arizona can shore up the running game, then they're probably not going to give up too many yards, and maybe they keep Seattle behind the chains. There just doesn't seem like there's a lot of upside in that Seattle offense. So those are the two at first glance.
Right on, John. Who you got?
I think Seattle's okay. Jacksonville's probably the chalk defense, right, against the Jets at home, 4,100. If you want to pay for it in cash games, I have zero problems with that. On the lower end, right now, Football Outsiders has Chicago Bears as the 4th overall DVOA defense, and they're playing Tampa Bay. And we know that Fitzpatrick can have a bad game at any given time. I want to save the money, and that's probably where I'll end up as of Thursday night.
They're the chalk in cash.
Chicago is, you think?
Yeah. With everyone's going to try and save money. I really think that Kamara and Elliott is going to be somewhat popular in cash. Mm-hmm. With no one likes the top end receivers, clearly, at least on this show. We named about 15 guys that are sub 5K.
Right.
You can go down and get, if you went down and got the Bears defense, your flex position could be pretty good, or your wide receiver 1 could be decent. So I really think it's the Bears as the number 1 defense in cash.
Yeah, I mean, Fitzmagic has been throwing for a lot of yards, but he's also had a lot of picks he had 3 last week, not a lot on the season. On
FanDuel, I think it's Cleveland going up against Oakland at 3,500, just because they've priced the Browns, so their pricing algorithm has them as basically the 2017 Browns, and they've actually forced quite a bit of turnovers. And Myles Garrett, I've talked about a couple times in the show, but at 3,500, they're too cheap. And the last team that I'll throw out there, why not, is actually the Detroit Lions. So I think their secondary so far this year, at least, has been one of the best in football. I think that they could really force Dallas to just run the ball. But the problem is, I mean, the issue for Dallas is if they get behind, what do? They're going to be forced to throw. They're not an offense that can throw. And they're going up against one of the best secondaries in football at the moment. I think this could be a long day for Dallas if they get behind early in this game.
Ryan held up the red black-eyed Joe for that Detroit call. You don't like it?
Yeah, I don't strenuously object to steal a line from a few good men, but I like taking defenses against teams that throw a lot because you get the chance for the sacks, the strip sacks, the fumbles, the interceptions, and Dallas just doesn't want to do that. So if that game, to Devin's point, if Dallas is way behind, sure.
The only way it works is if they get behind.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know that it does. So that was all.
Yeah, John, did you have something you want to add here?
Whatever it was, I've already forgotten.
Perfect. Excellent. John's about to turn into a pumpkin. It is getting late. Let's talk stacks. John, do you remember one or two stacks that you're interested in this week?
Well, I don't really remember, but I write them down because I know as we start getting past 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm almost out. Looking at this, I wonder, okay, so I've got a couple ideas thus far. I think you could do worse, especially if Keenan Allen is out. You could do worse than taking Phillip Rivers with Melvin Gordon and Antonio Gates. And you could theoretically have all the touchdowns in that game.
Except Mike Williams when he catches 2.
Right.
I thought you were going to say Mike Williams. That seemed like the obvious direction.
Why not add Mike Williams in there at 4,500?
Well, what if I only get 4 touchdowns? If I get 5, maybe I'll throw Mike Williams in there. So I kind of like getting all the capturing all the points with the Chargers, who are second only behind the Falcons in terms of total points, implied points. If you want to do a game stack, if you really believe that Drew Brees, can keep that offense going, I don't know. I mean, New Orleans is not good on defense. I think we can all agree on that. I think you could do an Eli super stack in like the Millie Maker. Eli, Odell, Sterling Shepard, and then run him back with Alvin Kamara and get all.
When John says start Odell, you start Odell.
That's what I was going to say. He's the Odell whisperer. When we talked about top end receivers and he didn't mention Odell, I just assumed that Beckham was out of the picture. But wasn't that where you guys met? Devin and John and Jeff Pasquino were all in the same live final together, and then. John I
was in first until Odell went Odell, and I didn't finish well because of that.
That was the game where he did his famous reach over the head thing, right? Yeah. All right.
I could show you something. You guys just keep talking.
Okay. Yeah. You go get
He's
something.
He's going to get his big check.
Show and tell time. Uncle John's going to –
Happy Gilmore check.
What was this site again? Fantasy Aces.
Move it to your right so we don't see the site.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Oh, sorry. He just keeps that around, in case.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Not only around, but like within 7 feet at all times.
Yeah. He knew that was coming.
He spent it all on dog pillows, by the way.
And that fat head behind him. Oh, man. All right. That was awesome. Devin, who are you stacking this week?
Yeah, I think that Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry.
Baker Mayfield, here comes.
So we're doing that.
I mean, did you guys watch the second half? Like, how could you not be, intrigued that – this is a guy who he came from the same offense that Patrick Mahomes came out of, and look at what Mahomes is doing. So – he's a gunslinging quarterback who can throw the ball anywhere on the field. Do I expect it? No, it's a stack and it'll be a GPP play. But the other stack that I like is Matt Ryan and Mohamed Sanu. So it's a complete. If everything, it's completely fading Calvin Ridley, basically saying he's going to normalize, and defenses are going to focus on Ridley, and it could be a Sanu 2-touchdown game.
Huh.
GPP only, not
of course.
Cash. But, yeah. If you want a cash stack, it's Rivers and Mike Williams.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that as a cash
Don't
stack.
start 39-year-old Antonio Gates. John likes people who are close to getting senior cups of coffee at McDonald's, but don't start old man Gates.
Is he only 39?
I don't know. He's not 40, I don't think.
He's 2,700. He just has to fall into the end zone, and he reaches
38.
We're talking about his price.
That's John's favorite. That's part of John's Sunday morning ritual is to get that senior cup of coffee at McDonald's. Ryan, tell me about some stacks that you got.
Yeah, so it's a really boring stack week. I'm just figuring this out. It's really difficult. In cash games, I might just I don't know if it's a stack. I suppose it is because he's going to catch passes. But Andy Dalton and Gio Bernard would be a nice combo. I think it gives you a high floor. It even gives you a ceiling if Bernard catches a touchdown. He's going to get all the usage. We've seen it when Mixon is out. We've seen it last year. We've seen it last week. So Bernard, even without the pass catching, the touches are there. The floor is there. And then kind of on the same vein as the Mohamed Sanu call, Matt Ryan and Austin Hooper. Hooper leads the Falcons in air yards inside the 10-yard line, and tight end is such a disaster. You're just hoping for touchdowns anyways. And we know Julio Jones doesn't score them, and this is the first time I've mentioned Julio Jones.
I've warned you guys for 3 weeks.
So that's a record because we're how long into the show, and I just mentioned Julio Jones. And didn't even recommend him, and I'm not going to. So Hooper, Ryan, Bernard, Dalton. So you can kind of get cheap pieces of the highest scoring game on the main slate and then build with expensive pieces from other games. So that sounds pretty good to me.
And if you haven't read the trend spotting article, ignore the first 3 articles because it was all about Julio Jones. And Ryan finally listened to me that Julio Jones doesn't score touchdowns, so don't play him.
Last week was mostly Julio Jones.
So what I'm writing down is it's Julio Jones week.
Me too. I heard the same.
A lot of Kamara goodness last week too, just an FYI.
Yeah. No. So let's do parting thoughts. Let's do some short parting thoughts here. Devin, tell us, what are your exiting thoughts for our listeners and viewers?
It's a weird week. So it's a week that what scares me the most this week is Aaron Rodgers throwing for 5 touchdowns. This is a week where no one is on Rodgers. He has the knee injury, but he comes out and it's a typical 280-yard and 5 touchdown game from Rodgers against the Bills. I think that it's coming soon, and I don't have a lot at the moment, so that worries me the most. But other than that, it's a week that in cash, like I said, I'm paying for Kamara and Elliott, spending down at wide receiver, and check the blog to see what my FanDuel lineup is for later this week.
Right on. John, parting thoughts.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I talked a lot during the show. My perspective is, when you're looking at things, be very analytical with regards to over or under emphasizing current results based on 3 games. Make sure you're looking and seeing what those 3 games, who the opponents were. If a team is really killing it, like Ryan Fitzpatrick is the example I'm thinking of right now. He's got 3 games of 400 yards, and they're starting them, and I understand why they're starting him over Jameis Winston, but the truth is he's still Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's a reason he's been a backup quarterback for a long time. You need to be looking at the data in such a way that it makes sense. And I think that there's a reason to get away from him as well as other players this week.
I like that advice. I don't even release my normalized strength of schedule until after I've got 4 games of data because it's just, you got to look at the details more early in the season rather than the broad trend numbers. Ryan, tell me, what are your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I think we kind of covered the fantasy football angle. So I just want to give a shout out to an awesome sports weekend that we have going on here. So starting tomorrow, Ryder Cup, go USA in the Ryder Cup.
Bet the Europeans.
Yeah, they are getting plus money and they're at home. Thanks for the anti-American sentiment.
For a quick buck.
There's a really big college football game going on Saturday night, and then the undercard that's happening, Ohio State facing Penn State. Sorry, Devin. No, but Ryder Cup is going to be great. The football is going to be great, and even if you play non-main slate DFS, all those games are going to be great, kind of as we talked about. So saddle up, watch some sports, and have a great time. And I hope everybody has a good weekend.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again, guys, for a fun show and making me laugh for a while here. Be sure to check out all of our DFS content over at footballguys.com. Check out that free article by Steve Buzzard talking about his game theory behind his million dollar lineup. And we'll be back next Friday morning with our next episode. Thanks for listening and watching. I'm Austin Lee. On behalf of John Lee, Ryan Hester, Devin Knotts, thank you for tuning in, and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.